My name is Rowan Ashford. The day I brought my wife into Blackforge, the entire city turned out to welcome a blind princess, while half the court waited to see whether I would be dead before dinner or after it. I remember the feeling all too well. The Blackstone Road leading up to Blackforge cut across the mountain flank like an old slash. Thin ice covered the surface, and on both sides, sheer cliffs plunged into a deep chasm filled with white mist. The royal guard rode ahead in black armor banners of House Vorga fluttering in the cold wind. The Queen's war carriage rolled before us like a warning. I kept Bran at Kiara's side. Mira was gone. The orc woman who had curled by my hearth counted steps through my great hall and touched every chair as though the world could only be measured by her fingertips no longer existed. Beside me now rode Kiara Vorga, only daughter of the northern orc throne, the woman who had watched me for weeks with eyes that had never truly been blind. I had not forgiven her. For 3 days the same question burned in my head: how deep had the lie gone? Kiara kept perfect pace with Bran. Dark green cloak wrapped tight black hair tied neatly at her neck. Every time she glanced at me, I felt it. She knew I felt it. I refused to look back. At noon on the third day, the party halted at the foot of the fortress. Blackforge rose like a colossal iron beast born from the mountain. Walls impossibly tall, towers sharp as spears, chain bridges swaying over bottomless chasms. Narrow windows stared down like the eyes of beasts. Beautiful, Kiara asked quietly. Dangerous, I answered. She did not argue. The moment we passed beneath the main gate, bronze horns screamed against the stone. The square knelt. They knelt for the Queen. But many eyes lifted toward Kiara as though seeing a ghost returned. And toward me. The news that the princess had survived had reached them first. The news that the princess had married a human man had probably reached them too. One look at the silver Ashford ring on her finger told them everything. A line of nobles in dark robes waited on the steps of the great hall. At their head stood Queen Varga One-Eye. No armor today, only a severe black court gown embroidered with silver. The long scar across her missing eye was stark, but it was her remaining eye that made men look away. Cold, old, intelligent, and used to ordering death, she did not embrace her daughter. She simply placed her hand on Kiara's forehead, a ritual of ownership rather than a mother's touch. You have returned. Yes, mother. And your husband Kiara turned to me. For the first time since the gate, I stepped up beside her. I am Rowan Ashford. The Queen studied me from head to foot without hiding her assessment. The man from Frost Hollow, she said. The one who picked up my daughter in a blizzard and married her before he knew he had dragged the entire border into his house. It sounds like a terrible decision. The corner of her mouth twitched. I have not decided yet. No one behind her laughed. They were not allowed to. The first dinner in Blackforge was a trial by fire. I was seated at Kiara's right, facing 3 gray-faced orc lords and a younger broad-shouldered man with an iron wolf emblem on his collar. He stared at me the entire meal, as if deciding whether to kill me with his wine cup or his dinner knife. The Queen introduced him. Gorvak Ironblood, my nephew, general of the Eastern armies. He inclined his head just enough. Lord Ashford. His tone held no respect, only a velvet-wrapped blade. I hear you are very brave, he said. Marrying a woman you barely knew. I placed both hands on the table and looked him straight in the eye. And I hear you are very busy, so busy that Carrick slavers operate freely in your mountains. The table went dead silent. Kiara inhaled sharply. The Queen showed nothing. Gorvak smiled. I like him, he told the Queen. At least he is not soft. The Queen's voice cut like ice. Do not kill my daughter's husband before the main course, Gorvak. I hate eating in silence. That night after the feast, Kiara came to the guest chamber assigned to me in the western wing. She did not knock. I was removing my coat when the door opened. You're angry, she said. At least that is honest. She closed the door. If you stay silent, the court will say I forced this marriage. I gave a dry laugh. Didn't you? The words cut across her face. She lowered her gaze for a moment, then lifted it again. At first, I only wanted shelter for one night. Then I stayed because I didn't want to leave. The marriage protected me, but I said yes for more than protection. I looked at the ring on her finger. If the queen hadn't arrived today, how long would Mira have lived? Her silence answered everything. Get out, Rowan, out. Rowan. At the door, she stopped. Tomorrow, my mother will explain why I had to be blind. If you still hate me, then I won't blame you. She left. I stood in the cold stone room and, for the first time since our wedding, I seriously considered walking away. Then I heard soft footsteps in the hallway, too quiet for armored guards. I killed the lamp and drew my sword. The footsteps paused right outside my door, then moved on. The next morning, I found a small wooden doll on my threshold. Its eyes had been gouged out. No note. None was needed. Blackforge had just sent its first warning. Queen Varga summoned me to the North Tower right after dawn the next morning. The room stood at the highest level, wide but never soft. Heavy chairs, long tables, black stone pillars, tapestries woven with wolves and spears. Narrow windows cut like knife slashes into the mountainside. She stood with her back to the door, watching soldiers drill in the square below. No guards inside. That made me more alert, not less. You slept, she asked without turning. Yes, you lie badly. I live on the border. Good liars die young. She gave a low sound that might have been a laugh. Sit, Rowan Ashford. If I wanted you dead today, I would not have let you keep your sword. I sat, but I did not relax. The queen turned. Her single eye pinned me in place. My daughter says you need the truth. No. I need to know how much of our marriage was real. She accepted the blade with a single nod. Then listen. She spoke without pity or softness. When Kyara was 5, poison was slipped into the winter feast. 2 half-brothers died in one night. The queen survived but lost an eye and 4 trusted guards. Kyara had seen what no child should see. From behind a tapestry, she had watched the man with the iron wolf ring on his hand speak to the servant who poured the wine. Gorvak's emblem, I said. Yes, he was only 15. Someone used him as a symbol. I had no proof, only a 5-year-old girl in a palace full of knives. Ancient orc law demanded the heir must see battle flags and hold the blood seal. A blind child was no urgent threat. You turned your daughter into a ghost to keep her alive. The queen's single eye never wavered. I turned her into something the monsters would forget to kill. Would you have done differently if she were your daughter? I thought of Lila and stayed silent. She placed a sealed letter on the table. Witness statements proving Kyara avoided falling objects, turned toward voices, red faces. Rumors, she said. Before the next full moon, half the city will call her a fraud. She already had the new story, Moon Veil. A rare mist that let the princess sense light and movement but not faces. The kidnapping and cold had begun to lift it. A miracle, I muttered. A story the people can swallow and the nobles cannot immediately overturn. The side door opened. Kara stepped in. She wore a dark green battle tunic trimmed with silver hair, braided tight, a small crescent moon pendant at her throat. Her steel-gray eyes were sharp and unguarded. You heard everything she said. Enough. She took one more step. I never wanted to lie to you until the end. At Frost Hollow, I never thought I would return here. Mother wants me to play Moon Veil a little longer in public, and with me, her voice softened. With you, I don't want to act anymore. That afternoon, the queen held a small audience with loyal houses. I stood at Kyara's right, not as husband, but as living proof of the princess who survived the border. The meeting went smoothly until a young noblewoman dropped her wine cup toward Kiera. Kiera stepped back too fast, too precise. Several eyes narrowed. I didn't think. I simply pulled her against me. Careful. She is still not used to bright fire after the fever. The queen seized the moment and repeated the Moonveil explanation. The whispers died. That night, when we returned to our chamber in the eastern wing, Kiera closed the door. Thank you. I didn't do it because I forgive you, I know. Then why? Because I will not let them tear you apart in front of me. She asked quietly, what is left between us? Debt, anger, a bed we share, but don't yet trust, and the fact that I still listen for your footsteps. The next morning, they found a young guard dead beneath the eastern moat. In his hand was a torn scrap of paper, on it only one line: if the princess can see, the princess must die a second time. Blackforge tightened like a noose the morning after the guard was found dead. Side gates were barred. Guards changed shifts with new secret signals. Nobles moved through the halls with fewer smiles and lower bows, their eyes sliding toward Kiera as though she might explode at any moment. The queen called the death cleaning the castle and kept pushing the Moonveil story as if nothing had happened. But the first death always drags the second behind it. 2 days later, a 17-year-old maid who served Kiera's chambers disappeared. By evening, they found her in the wine cellar, throat cut cleanly like a slaughtered goat, no scream, professional. Kiera stood in the corridor looking at the covered body. Her face stayed calm, but her hand gripped my sleeve until the knuckles turned pale green. She was only 17, she said. I stood beside her and saw the price of a throne already sinking into her bones. You know why they die, I said. Because they knew too much. In Blackforge, knowing the wrong secret is more dangerous than doing the wrong thing, or because someone is spilling blood at the edges to scare you. She turned to me. You're beginning to understand this place. I hate this place. So do I. Kiera looked at the body one last time and lowered her voice. But if I don't take the throne, more of the living will die. That afternoon, she led me into the old archive. The door had been locked by an old clerk who loved wine more than keys. Kiera had kept a copy of that key for years. She pulled out a faded genealogy scroll and several sealed letters, spreading them on a dusty table. This is why my mother was afraid for more than just my life, she said. According to ancient Blackforge law, the throne could pass through the female line only if the heir was the queen's blood daughter, survived the trial of embers, and had never been married off in a court alliance. Gorvak is a nephew, not blood, I said. Correct. He is strong because he controls the Eastern Army, not because of law. Kiera touched a faded red line on the scroll. If the world still believes I am blind, he only has to wait. If the world knows I can see, he must kill me immediately. And now I have married an outsider. The law becomes even messier. Some will say I tainted the bloodline. Others will say the marriage frees me from old betrothals, and some will try to use you to control me. I turned another page and froze. The Ashford seal stared back at me. Not mine, my father's. What the hell is this? Kiera's voice was quiet. I was going to tell you later. The letter was 23 years old. My father had once been warden of the Northern Pass, the legal overseer of trade between Blackforge and the human lands. House Ashford had been the living bridge in the old border treaty. My father never spoke of it. After the ambush that killed him, all ties were erased, Kiera said. That is why my mother did not annul our marriage the first day. We carried the documents to the Queen that same night. She read them, set the papers down, and said exactly what I expected. I did not tell you because you would have been angry. I am angry. But that does not make it less useful. She looked straight at me. House Ashford was once the legal bridge between our peoples. Your marriage to Kiera does not only save her life, it accidentally revives an old alliance many thought dead. I don't like the word accidentally. Politics rarely asks the middle piece for permission. Kiera stepped forward. Mother, did you plan to use him from the beginning? The queen looked at her daughter for a long moment, then answered, I planned to use everything I could to keep you alive. The air between them thickened into something painful and familiar. Before we left, the queen added one more thing that stopped us both. Gorvak is not the only one I fear. I turned. Who else? Someone inside my closest circle sold Kiera's travel route to the Carrick slavers. She looked at her daughter, and to this day I still do not know who. The words turned my throat cold. The closest circle could be anyone, a senior advisor, a trusted general, or even the woman who had taught Kiera to walk like a blind child. That night, Kiera and I sat across a low table in our chamber, 2 candles burning low. Snow fell thinly outside the window. I'm sorry, she said. Not for the blindness, for not telling you about your father's connection. When did you know the first night at Frost Hollow, when you told me your name? I leaned back. Have you ever been with me without calculating? She met my eyes without flinching. Yes, when I forgot I was supposed to be blind. When you talked about Lila. When you told Marta not to give me less meat. When you proposed and said you had started listening for my footsteps in the hall. The candle flame crackled. You still used me, I said. Yes. But you love me, yes. The word came straight, clean, painful, and true. I walked to the window. It took me a long time to speak. You drive me mad. I know. And the worst part is, I still want to stay. Behind me, Kiera whispered, so do I. It was not forgiveness, but it was the first real step back toward each other. The next morning we caught Varkin. Not by magic, because he was stupider than he thought. He disguised himself as a coal carrier at the eastern gate, but forgot to change his Eastern Army boots with the special nails. Kara recognized the sound of his footsteps before the guards did. When they dragged him into the dungeon, he was still smiling, as if he held the advantage. Until Kara asked the first question, who in my mother's closest circle sold me to the Carrick slavers? Varkun's smile faltered just a fraction. We had only scratched the surface of the snake pit. Interrogating Varkun was not easy. He was stubborn, loyal in the way men are when loyalty is all they have left. But every stubborn man has a crack. Kiera found his by refusing to raise her voice. For 3 nights she went to the dungeon alone. Same questions, same calm rhythm. No whips, no threats. Varkin cursed, spat, laughed in her face. On the 3rd night he finally cracked. I stood behind the iron grate and listened. You think Gorvak will ransom you? Kiera asked, voice steady. Varkin sneered. He does not abandon his own. Kiera stepped closer, the oil lamp painted half her face, gold and sharp. Then why did he send you, with only 3 men and a handful of slavers? If I had died in the blizzard, would Gorvak have wept, or would he have simply regretted a broken toy? Varkin stayed silent. She tilted her head. You are not his man. You are the knife he throws away after using. 1 heartbeat passed. Then Varkin laughed hoarsely, but the certainty was gone. You think speaking like this will make me betray him? No, Kiera said softly. I only think you deserve to know the truth before you die. That was the final cut. The next morning, Varkun talked. Not everything, but enough. Gorvak had been involved in finding Kiera. The Carricks were only the tool. The person who sold her exact travel route was not a great lord or general. It was Lady Malin, head of the Royal Protocol Office, the frail old woman who had taught Kiera how to eat, stand, and bow like a blind child since she was 7. Kiera heard the name and said nothing for half a minute. Her silence was more frightening than any scream. I followed her out into the cold stone corridor. Are you all right? No. She kept walking until we reached a small room beside the old library. There she stopped, braced both hands on the table, and bent her head. Her shoulders were so tight they looked ready to snap. "She taught me how to count stairs," she whispered. "How to hold a bowl without turning my eyes to it. Every time I truly stumbled, she was the first to pick me up." I stood behind her and placed my hand on her shoulder. She turned. The space between us was thin as winter breath. "You are the only one who loved me without knowing how much I was worth." The words went straight into me. I lowered my head until our foreheads touched, then our lips. This kiss was nothing like the one in the chapel or by the fire at Frost Hollow. It carried anger, memory, and everything still raw. But because of that, it was real. When we parted, Kiara rested her forehead on my shoulder. "Don't forgive me too quickly," she said. "I wasn't planning to." A small silence. "But don't leave me. If I left, you would start having people listen for my footsteps again." Kiara laughed softly against my collar, the first real laugh I had heard from her since we left Frost Hollow. Blackforge never let anyone rest for long. The queen decided to strike before Gorvak could gather more strength. She called a grand audience in the Hall of Ashes. Every major house and selected commoners had to attend. The goals were simple: make the Moonveil story, law confirm Kiara's sight was returning, declare our marriage legal, and arrest Lady Malin in front of everyone. The hall was packed. Braziers burned high. House banners hung from the balconies. Black armored soldiers formed living walls. Kiara wore a silver-gray court gown, hair braided in the heir's style. I stood at her right in the simple black of House Ashford. From there I could see Gorvak below. He smiled faintly as Kiara stepped forward. The queen spoke first, telling the Moonveil story as a long-born family affliction. After the kidnapping and cold, the mist had begun to lift. The crowd murmured, some believed, some did not. Then Kiara stepped forward. "I do not ask you to believe, because I am a princess," she said. "I only speak the truth of my own body. From childhood, I lived inside a veil. Now it is lifting." She paused. "But what should concern you is not my eyes. It is why slavers dared touch someone of Blackforge and why someone inside the palace sold them the root." The hall went dead silent. Kiara turned straight toward Lady Malin. "Lady Malin," she said, voice carrying to the back of the hall. "Will you step forward yourself, or shall the guards drag you?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Malin did not deny it. She only looked at Kiara for a long moment, then smiled sadly. "I taught your highness to play blind for 15 years, she said. "I never thought you would learn to kill with your voice as well." The queen gave the signal. Guards moved. At that exact moment, Malin drew a thin silver needle from her sleeve and drove it into her own throat before anyone could reach her. She collapsed at the foot of a pillar of fire. Chaos exploded, screams, clashing armor, running feet. And in the middle of it, Gorvak laughed. I saw it clearly. Not loud, just the corner of his mouth lifting the instant Malin fell as if she had completed her final task. I leaned to Kiara's ear. He knew she would die. Kiara's jaw tightened. No. He put that death in her hand. The audience ended in blood and chaos, but on the surface, the queen had won. The Moonveil story was now public. Kiara was no longer the fake blind princess. Our marriage was recognized before the people. But I understood the worst thing. Malin had died too quickly. That meant the real player was still inside the walls, calm enough to watch one of his pieces cut her own throat without blinking. That night the queen called me alone. No Kiara. Varga looked older after the audience. For the first time, the steel in her shoulders showed a crack. "I am being poisoned slowly," she said, as if speaking of the weather. I stared, certain I had misheard. "How long?" "More than a year." "Does Kiara know? No. And you will not tell her unless I die before I can." She looked straight at me. If I fall while she is still seen as a blind shadow, Blackforge will swallow her. I need everyone to see her stand straight before I die." Before I left, she added one last thing. "If that night at Frost Hollow you had not picked her up, I would have lost my daughter. If, in the days ahead, I lose my life, do not let Blackforge lose her too." It was not a plea, it was an entrustment. And 3 nights later, Blackforge burned. I woke to war bells ringing from 3 directions at once. Not ordinary fire bells. These were the bells that meant the fortress had been breached. One from the eastern gate, one from the armory, one from the south tower. That is how a coup always begins. Not with a single roar, but with many small explosions, so no one knows where to run. Kiera sat up at the same instant I did. In the darkness before dawn, she already had her hand on the knife beneath the pillow before I could reach my sword. "Gorvak," she said. I didn't answer. There was no need. Outside the door came the sound of running feet. 3 short knocks hammered the wood. Highness Open Kiera recognized the voice first. "Captain Sareth." I opened the door. Sareth stood there, half her armor dark with blood at the left shoulder. "The eastern gate was open from inside," she said urgently. "Gorvak's troops are in, Carrick men too. The queen is holding the Hall of Ashes." She gave one final order: "Take her highness to the seal vault. If the hall falls, only the air may touch the blood seal and close the inner gates." Kiera went pale. "She is at the front line. She refuses to retreat." I grabbed my sword belt and pulled Kiera toward the door, but Sareth blocked us. "No time for the main corridors. Follow me." We ran hidden stairs. 2 more loyal guards joined us on the lower level. One was old Malric, keeper of the seal's gray hair, matted with blood, but still clutching the iron box of keys like it was his own heart. At the 3rd turn, we were cut off. 3 Eastern soldiers and 1 Carrick in light leather. They did not expect Kiera to be so fast. That hesitation killed them. Sareth charged first. I parried the opening blow and cut across the Carrick's throat. Kiera slipped past my left side and drove her knife under the second man's armor with deadly precision. We kept moving deeper. The seal vault lay beneath the heart of the fortress, behind a stone door carved with fire and wolf fangs. Malric had just turned the 2nd key when the ground above us shook hard enough for dust to rain like snow. "The hall has been hit," Sareth said. Kiera froze. I grabbed her wrist. "Look at me." She did. "Open the seal, now." That was when the highest war horn sounded from above, not Gorvak's, the Queen's, 1 long note, 3 short. Malric went white. "That is the emergency succession call." Kiera stepped back. "No." Sareth bowed her head a fraction. "She knows she cannot hold the hall." I felt the blood turn cold in my veins. "The door," I growled. Malric opened the final lock. The stone slab slid aside, revealing the circular chamber with its black fire pedestal and the blood seal of House Vorga resting on its pillar. Kiera walked into the red glow. Ancient fire runes lit around her feet. She stopped before the seal hand, trembling once, then pressed it down. The ground beneath the entire fortress trembled. Far above, a great crash echoed. The inner gates began to close. Chain bridges groaned. Bells changed rhythm. Hidden passages locked by mechanisms only the seal bearer could trigger. Kiera breathed hard. Veins of fire ran across the back of her hand like molten ink. "It is done," she said. But it was not. Malric cried out. An arrow flew from the dark corridor and punched through the old man's throat. The key box clattered to the floor. Down I pulled Kiera flat. Sareth spun her shield in front of the seal. 2 figures burst from the tunnel, one of them Gorvak. He wore real battle plate now, blood and soot streaked along the shoulders. Eyes bright with the look of a man who no longer needed to hide. At last he said, looking at Kiera, "You stand where you were always meant to stand. The throne does not belong to the man who sold the princess to slavers," Kiera answered. Gorvak laughed. You still think you are the victim? You lived because of that blind act. I am the one who had to watch the whole court bow to a shadow my aunt hid behind a veil. Sareth charged. Gorvak blocked sparks flying. I stopped the second attacker. Kiera snatched Malric's fallen sword and rose. From the deeper corridor, a squad of the Queen's black guards spilled down fighting and retreating. And between them, supported by 2 men, was Varga One-Eye. Blood soaked the front of her cloak. Sareth faltered when she saw the Queen. Gorvak shoved her into a pillar and spun his sword toward Kiera. I met it in time. The impact jarred all the way to my elbow. The Queen's voice grated like stones grinding kneel before the seal Kiera. The whole world compressed into 1 second. Kiera looked at her mother, then at me. Then she knelt before the fire pedestal. Varga pushed her guards aside and walked straight through her own blood. Each step left a red print on the stone. She drew the short dagger at her hip, sliced her own palm, and pressed the blood to Kiera's forehead. I Varga Vorga, Queen of Blackforge, she said, voice ringing despite the blood at the corner of her mouth, before the seal of our ancestors, before the fire of the city, before the blood of House Vorga passed supreme power to Kiera Vorga, sole heir, keeper of the seal, next Queen of Blackforge. The fire beneath the pedestal roared to life, real flames, red and gold, coiling around the base like a beast that had just accepted a new master. Gorvak roared no and charged like a madman. I met him halfway. Our blades rang. The Queen's final order rang out. Hold the door. Her loyal guards formed a half circle in front of the tunnel, using their bodies as a living wall. I heard Kiera cry, "Mother," but Varga did not turn. She looked straight at her daughter with her single, sharp eye. Live, and do not be blind again. Then she pushed open the eastern side door for me. Take her to the upper throne. But go. I pulled Kiera with me. She fought for 1 step, then stopped when she saw 3 loyal guards and Sareth kneel around the Queen like a final wall. They knew they would die here. The great stone door between the vault and the main corridor began to lower. The last image I saw before it slammed shut was Queen Varga One-Eye, cloak soaked with blood, standing with the men who had followed her all her life, facing Gorvak's soldiers and the fire pouring in. When the door closed, the sound of clashing steel became a muffled thunder. Kiera collapsed on the stairs. I knelt with her, gripping her shoulders. Look at me. She could barely breathe. Kiera. She lifted her eyes. They were full of water, but did not break. She just bought you time. Now you are the one they died to keep alive. We climbed the spiral stair that opened behind the main throne. Below us, the Hall of Ashes had become a battlefield. Kiera stepped onto the balcony of the upper throne, covered in blood ash and a torn court gown. The soldiers below looked up. Kiera drew her mother's sword. Her voice rang like steel on a bell. Varga Vorga died as a queen of Blackforge. Whoever opened the gates for slavers is a traitor to the kingdom. Whoever stands with Gorvak is a traitor to the seal. I am Kiera Vorga. From this moment, Blackforge belongs to me. Silence fell like a hovering spear. Then a line of northern guards knelt first, then more. Not all, but enough. Gorvak looked up from the hall, face white in the firelight. He understood he had lost tonight, not by numbers, but by 1 single heartbeat. That heartbeat had been all Varga needed to lock the seal into Kiera's hand. He retreated through an eastern side passage before I could reach him. By dawn, Blackforge lay quiet as a fresh graveyard. Queen Varga One-Eye and her 7 closest loyalists lay on the central stone bier. Kiera stood at the head of the line, hair loose, eyes red, but back straight. I stood at her left shoulder where everyone could see. In her first proclamation as the new queen, she announced 3 things. First, Varga's death was the result of Gorvak Ironblood's rebellion and his paid Carrick traitors. Second, the official explanation of her sight was now public. She had suffered moonveil since childhood. After the kidnapping and cold, her vision had begun to return. Third, the marriage to Rowan Ashford. Lord of Frost Hollow was recognized by the throne, and House Ashford was restored as protector of the northern border. On the second night after the funeral, I found her on the eastern rooftop. Kiera stood alone in the wind, looking down at the countless fires in the city. No heavy cloak, as if cold, no longer mattered. "It is quieter than I expected," she said when she heard my footsteps. "They are waiting to see if you fall." She turned and rested her forehead against my chest. Since I was small, I thought if my mother died, I would finally be free. Now she is really gone, and I only feel as if someone has cut away part of my spine. I draped my cloak over her shoulders. Kiera looked up at me. "Is this where the arc ends?" "No," I said, pulling her closer. "That is only what they think." Below us, Blackforge smoldered. Gorvak was still alive. The Carricks were gathering somewhere in the south. Dark clouds massed again in the east. I was no longer the quiet rancher of Frost Hollow. I was husband to the new queen of Blackforge. And Kiera Vorga, the woman once forced to live as one who must not see, now ruled a kingdom that stared straight at her. The story between us had only just begun.